Well, we get it rolling on the Krug Show Thursday, May the 25th, and the NBA draft rolling up on about a month away. And who better to talk basketball with us is Matt Babcock, who joins us, senior NBA analyst for Draft Digest. You can check out his podcast, The Matt Babcock Show, where all podcasts are found. And he's back with us on the Krug Show to talk a little bit about the Warriors pick at 19 and the Chicago pre-draft camp and of course the upcoming NBA draft. Matt, good to see you. Thanks for coming back on, and we always appreciate your knowledge and your time. How you doing?
I'm doing great. No, good to see you as always, and thanks for having me back.
Well, let's talk a little bit. I watched all the scrimmages from Chicago. You were in Chicago for the pre-draft camp. How important is the pre-draft camp in the grand scheme of things for NBA general managers and personnel people trying to, decipher, who to pick where in this 2-round draft coming up at the end of June? How important is what happens in Chicago to that process?
It's really important and for different reasons and for, different reasons for different players and different teams. And I mean, one simple fact is, they have the NBA draft lottery during that week. And so that, that way we finally know the draft order and things start taking shape. And I think as far as the activities at the actual draft combine, the two things that are most important are behind closed doors. The interviews with teams, with each of the prospects, and then all the medical testing, which a lot of that isn't ever released or leaked to the public, and that's really where things change. And then obviously the guys that do decide to play and play well, some of those guys are able to move the needle as far as their draft stock too. So yeah, big week. It's aside from the actual NBA draft, it's the biggest week of the year for me.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and about, your background before we get into some of the prospects.
Yeah, so I grew up in basketball. My dad, my two uncles have all worked in the NBA for a long time, and I've kind of been involved with basketball from a number of different angles. I grew up as a player. I coached for a little bit. I coached for an assistant coach for a professional team in Italy for a year. Worked as an agent for 10 years, and last handful of years I've worked in the media and as a consultant, pretty much covering the draft. And that's kind of my day in, day out, just covering the draft, 365 days a year.
Well, let's talk about the different paths to the NBA. You can go from high school to college and play, college ball for a, big time program at Kentucky and Arkansas, Carolina, Connecticut. Then there's the G League. Scoot Henderson, for example, who's, going to be a top 2 or 3 pick in this draft. He played in the G League. Then there's the select team, right? The overtime elite team. There's that, and which is also, I guess, in the G League. Then you have the international route. The first pick in the draft is expected to be Victor Wembanyama, who played professionally in France. What do you think? I mean, am I leaving any out? Is there any other option besides? So you have American college, you have the G League, and then you have the international route. What is?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think international. I mean, there's guys that are born in Europe or born internationally that come up as pros. There's also been Americans that have gone over Australia, for example, as a program. I believe it's called Next Stars program. LaMelo Ball did that a few years ago. Nobody super highly rated from the United States did that this year. But Ryan Rupert, who's a French player, was in Australia. He's likely to be a first-round pick. So yeah, a number of different routes for guys, and it makes it interesting from a scouting perspective because we're kind of watching guys in several different different areas.
What do you think's the best route? Is it, some people argue, well, if you play American college ball, you're going to get defensive principles that you don't get in the G League. Other people say, if you play internationally, you're playing against men and older guys who have more developed games, more developed bodies, and you get used to, kind of being, that's a better kind of proving ground for, a future in the pros. What do you think? Is there one route that you think's preferable?
I don't. I like all of them, and I think they all have unique pros and cons. And really, I look at it, from a case by case. I think it depends on the kid, what the weaknesses they need to address, where they're at from a maturity level. Because there's something to be said about going to college, just the sort of the life experience of it. It's sort of like a natural way of maturing, being around your peers. getting the widespread exposure, TV exposure and whatnot. But then, for example, a guy like Scoot Henderson, who's extremely mature and self-driven, putting him in a pro environment, I think there's an argument to be made that he developed better in that environment. So really just kind of depends. But I do think the optionality for these young guys is great.
Before we get into the prospects, let's tell everybody we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week in Marin, Wednesday through Sunday in Emeryville. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. All right, let's talk a little bit about some of the players. The widely speculated and expected at this point number one pick is going to be Victor Wembanyama, and the San Antonio Spurs won the draft lottery, so he goes to San Antonio. Man, the Spurs have had such great fortune in the draft lottery when you think of David Robinson, Tim Duncan, and obviously Kawhi Leonard, and now Victor Wembanyama getting the number one pick. Tell us about Wembanyama. I mean, he's 7'5", right? He's 220 pounds or so. He's a 19-year-old kid. People are describing him as one of the great players to come into the league. Is he a can't-miss player? Is there a comp that stands out? Tell us what you know about Wembanyama.
Yeah, he's incredible. I mean, like you said, he's 7'5", 8 foot wingspan. He's extremely thin, but he's fit. I mean, he's very lean, but takes care of his body. Does have somewhat of an athletic build. I do think he's going to be able to add weight, and from an on-court skill standpoint, he does a little bit of everything. He's got great instincts and coordination, and just overall very skilled. I mean, shoots threes, just great timing, finishing at the rim, blocking shots. So I do think he's a can't miss prospect on some level or another. I mean, he does have room for improvement, especially with adding physical strength. But I think he's going to be able to step in day one and probably be the Spurs best player right off the bat.
What's your biggest concern about him?
Just the body. I mean, he's a lot of times with unique body types, there's unique issues. So far, I mean, it doesn't seem like there's anything that's been popped up as a red flag. But you got to be worried about a guy that's that big and that thin.
One of the subplots of this upcoming draft is the controversy surrounding Brandon Miller. Is Miller gonna get beyond that controversy and wind up being the second pick? Would you have concerns if you had a chance to interview him in Chicago? What kinds of questions would you want to throw his way?
I think it was obviously a very unfortunate situation. I mean, to me, from my perspective, it really seemed like, it might have looked a lot worse than it actually was. I don't think he was responsible for it. I think it was just sort of bad timing. I think his teammate put him in a bad situation. And I do think from an NBA perspective, I don't think teams are overly concerned with it. And he's, this is not a kid that's caused a lot of trouble, coming up. And he's a very, well-spoken, nice kid. And so, yeah, I think he'll be considered with that second or third pick.
There's a lot of names in this draft that a lot of even hardcore basketball fans, hardcore NBA fans don't know a whole lot about because, they either didn't see these guys or, just don't follow the draft all that closely. Or, I'm looking at the top, let's say, the list of the I've got a mock draft in front of me, and it, basically it has the top 10 picks: international player, freshman. So it's basically one international player, and then the top 12 picks are all freshmen. The first non-freshman, non-international player that I'm seeing in the mock draft I'm looking at is Maxwell Lewis from Pepperdine, who's a sophomore. But basically all of the top, let's say, almost 20 players in the draft are either freshmen or international players. And that's kind of because of the NBA rules, right? Where they say you can't go straight from high school to the pros. So essentially, I guess the top tier prospects are all basically coming from the international ranks, or they're just finished their freshman year in college. Is that pretty much the summation of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's not really anything new either. And so how it works is with the first round being 2 years guaranteed contracts. I mean, if a guy is pegged as a first round pick, it's hard to pass up that opportunity. And so the guys that get in as more projected second round picks, there's more risk there because they have to fully negotiate those contracts. And so I think what happens is, for a young freshman or a young international player, if they're not a lock to get that guaranteed money, it makes it a little easier to justify going back to school, get it stronger, mature, get better all the way around. and have take another stab at it. Whereas a guy that's a sophomore, junior, or senior, there's not as much to accomplish by going back to school.
Wembanyama is obviously the top prospect, and he's going to go first to the Spurs. But the one thing about the NBA draft in 2023, it's a lot more projectable. I think it favors the better teams because oftentimes these players, this is a lot more of a projection-based draft, and you're kind of projecting freshmen into the future, and you're projecting growth, and every time you're projecting, that's always a risky situation. There are going to be guys in this lottery that probably are busts. And then there's going to be guys in the second round that may be even better than the guys that go in the lottery. That all being said, outside of Victor, give me some of your favorite players in the lottery this year.
Yeah, I mean, Victor's the clear-cut number one guy. And for me, Scoot Henderson from the G League Ignite would be the second. This kid's a point guard, on-ball creator that's built like a tank. I mean, it's sort of like, Derrick Rose in his prime, where he's just always coming at you with the ball and very explosive, and just a really tough kid too. I got to know him the last 2-3 years, and just really, really gets it. Just wired as a ultra competitor and worker. So I think he's ready to contribute right away, but I think he'll continue to get better. Brandon Miller, we discussed, and aside from him, being a part of that, horrible case, had a really good year at Alabama. 6'8", 6'9", shooter that can shoot off the move, shoot off the catch and shoot, but also put it on the deck a little bit too. Good rebounder. I think those are the top three guys, and right after them is Amen Thompson, as one of the twin brothers from Overtime Elite. He's the fourth guy for me, a 6'6", do-it-all, extreme athlete. Really probably most prepared to play point guard, even though he's 6'6" plus. And then his brother Asar is right behind him, just another extremely athletic kid that's 6'6", 6'7", and does a little bit of everything.
Let me ask you about some of my favorite players. I watched a lot of Kansas this year, and I really enjoy watching Grady Dick from Kansas, who's 6'8" freshman, 2 guard, but he gets off the floor. He's pretty athletic. He can finish. Definitely good size on the wing. He's 6'8". What do you think of Grady Dick? Some people comparing him to Gordon Hayward. I don't know about that comparison. To me, he seems a little different, but what do you think of the Kansas freshman and where do you project him to go? Some people are saying maybe top 10.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head with Grady, and I've watched him for years, since he was in high school, and yeah, big wing shooter, sniper even, and very confident kid, sort of fearless. I think he's capable of stepping in early on and hitting shots, which is a hard thing to do for a young guy, even if he's got the skill set. I think Grady's got the goods, and tested well at the combine. I mean, I think at one point it could have been said that he was deceptively athletic. I think that secret's out, and he's a pretty athletic kid for being a 6'8" shooter. As far as the Gordon Hayward comparison, I don't love it. I see where it's coming from as far as like a big wing that can shoot the ball well. I think Gordon's game is much more predicated on being able to put the ball on the floor. And even though that's not Grady's weakness, he's much more of a shooter, straight line driver. But good player nonetheless. And I currently have him projected going 9th to Utah, if I remember correctly, in our latest mock draft on Draft Digest.
What as far as defensively on that end of the floor, what can Grady Dick guard? Can he guard 2 guards? Can he guard small forwards? How do you see him defensively?
I wouldn't say the defensive end is his strong suit necessarily, but not a total liability as well. And I think with his size and just being a decent athlete, he's got the potential of being a guy that could be switchable, even if it's just defending on an average level. I think potentially you'd like to see him be able to guard 2s, 3s, maybe even some 4s.
The Warriors, I believe, are one of the teams I saw attended the workout for Chris Murray, who's Keegan Murray's brother. He played at Iowa. He's a junior. This is one of the older players. Warriors picked 19th overall. How would you compare Keegan Murray and Chris Murray? Chris Murray, they list at 6'8", 220, similar size, maybe an inch shorter than his brother. Is Keegan the better of the Murrays, or are they comparable? How would you compare the two?
Yeah, I mean, they're very similar. I mean, identical twins, and it's funny. I got to know Chris last summer at Damian Lillard's Formula Zero, and just sort of chatting with him casually. And I asked him point blank, "Hey, what's the difference between you and your brother?" And what he said was, he's like, "I'm left-handed, and my brother's right." And he said, "But the funny story is, when they were kids, their dad, they were both naturally left-handed, and the dad wanted them to shoot right." And Chris bought into it, or excuse me, Keegan bought into it, and he still shoots right-handed, and Chris did never switched. But long story short, I think Chris is very similar to Keegan, just maybe just a poor man's version. I think Keegan's just a little bit better all the way around. But Chris had a great year at Iowa, and that's actually who I have projected to go to the Warriors at 19, because I think he's ready to go. I mean, I think a team could play him right away. Great kid, just very well rounded stretch four.
You like him more as a 4 than a 3? I mean, they list him as kind of a combo forward. Do you think he's more of a power forward?
Yeah, I think he's a stretch four. That's how. I mean, he's got some versatility. He's got a great motor, similar to his brother, and he shoots the ball really well. I don't know if his ball skills are good enough to play on the wing too much, but so I would pencil him in as a stretch four.
It's funny. I'm looking at the NBA draft.net mock draft, and just right around the Warriors pick at 19 are 4 or 5 guys that I really like. Chris Murray's one of them. Another guy is a guy that I really liked in last year's draft, and he pulled out, and then he played in the G League after not playing well last year in Chicago, and that's Leonard Miller. And, Leonard Miller is just I mean, I'm not saying he's Garnett. He's definitely not Garnett, but he kind of reminds me of Garnett in that huge guy, 6'10", 6'11", long arms, super rail thin, but there's great fluidity there. And I saw him play in the scrimmage in Chicago, and just a totally different player than, or maybe I saw highlights of it. I'm not sure if he actually played in the scrimmage. But I know that he struggled last year in the scrimmages there in Chicago. How has Leonard Miller's game grown this year in the G League, and what's his upside? Because I mean, when I watch him, something tells me, man, this guy, if he got in the right situation with the right motivation, 3 years from now, we could be talking about, man, look at all these teams that passed on Leonard Miller. I mean, this guy's got guard like skills on a huge frame. What's your evaluation? It seems like it's taken him a while, but a lot of people say, well, you know what? He was really, really young a year ago. Would have been a mistake if he had jumped to the league last year. But he's obviously improved quite a bit in the last year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting. Last year, before the combine, he was getting buzz, as being a possible first round pick. I mean, people were talking about him as a, 6'9", 6'10" guard, which is not common by any means. And, he showed up to the combine, he played, and he really struggled. And, you can see he had all the size and all the tools you'd want. It just seemed like he was behind as far as putting them all together. And I had concerns of like, hey, is this guy just a tease? He shows some tools, but is he able to be effective on the floor? And credit to him, he went to the G League Ignite, played against a bunch of grown men, and really had a great year, and has really proved guys like myself wrong, and shown what he needed to show. And it looks like he's earned his way into likely being a first round pick.
Who would you comp him to? I mean, I threw out the Garnett thing. I mean, he's not Garnett, and would hate to put that on anybody. Garnett's a Hall of Famer, but I mean, this kid definitely has like there's liquid movements. You know what I mean? He moves like a guard. I mean, kind of. I mean, in a lot of ways, he kind of reminds me of KG in that he's just so long. He's got such fluidity to him. He just seems like he could become a spectacular talent over time, especially if you got in the right situation. Is there somebody in the league that you would comp Leonard Miller to?
I don't have a comp off the top of my head, and I don't necessarily agree with the Garnett comparison. Garnett, even though he was so well rounded from a skill set standpoint, I mean, he's really more of like a 4 or 5. I know early on in his career he defended some threes. With Leonard, I mean, I think he really is like a big guard. I mean, pencil him in as a 3 or as a 2, can do some ball handling as well. I don't know if he's necessarily a point guard, but secondary ball handling is definitely something I think he would be comfortable doing. And just a lot of upside. Like I mentioned before, he checks a lot of boxes as far as his tools and his sizes go. And I think he just, upside is really high, because if he keeps getting better all the way around, could utilize the his God-given talents.
Yeah, he seems like a really intriguing future rebounder. Averaged 12 boards a game this year. Those are good numbers. The other guy that I really loved watching him in some of the workouts and seeing him this year in the Big Ten is Trace Jackson Davis. This is Dale Davis's kid, right? And he's 6'9", 245, and you look at him and you wouldn't think, oh man, crazy athlete, but this guy's a really, really underrated athlete. He's from Greenwood, Indiana, Center Grove High School. I know Indiana's got another guy in the draft that's even higher rated than Trace Jackson Davis, but what do you think of Trace Jackson Davis? Because it seems like his secondary jump is really quick. He seems like, at 245, he moves really well, gets off the floor and gets up and down the floor well at that weight. What's your future prediction on Trace Jackson Davis?
I mean, he had an incredible year at Indiana. I mean, you can't deny the production and, undersized 5, very physical, explosive. Like you mentioned, I mean, very, very explosive leaper. I think his lateral foot speed's a little bit of an issue. He's not overly quick all the way around, but very, very explosive as a scorer and a rebounder. And I think he's somewhat polarizing. I mean, I've seen some people project him as high as being a first-round pick. I've got him more as like a mid-second. Just more, the style of play. I think he's much more of like an interior scorer than being a guy that's, sort of falls into one of the categories of being a very simple rim runner, rim protector type, or being a stretch big. He doesn't really fit either of those categories. And so like, that's what's holding me back on him a little bit. But I do think he's going to have a chance of earn a spot and clawing his way in.
It's an interesting guy because he really, like a lot of big men who like to shoot the three. This guy, I don't think if he took any threes at all, I didn't see him. I don't know if he made a three all year. He doesn't really have a perimeter game like that. In the NBA, is a Trace Jackson Davis strictly a 5?
I think so. And I think on the defensive end as well, I think he might struggle a little bit moving his feet, guarding 4s. And I mean, a lot of these teams are going really small where, guys that are playing the 4 essentially would have been 3s in years past. And so I see him mostly as just like a true big. And he's definitely got talent. And I mean, like I said before, you can't deny his production at the college level. So I do think it's going to translate on some level or another. I do think he needs to kind of find the right spot, though.
A couple of years ago, I really liked Isaiah Joe coming out of Arkansas, and I just loved the shooting form. And he was skinny, and I thought, well, yeah, he's a little skinny, but I mean, skinny doesn't really matter. It seems like anymore in the NBA. It's become more of a skill based game, less about your bulk. But Isaiah Joe kind of came of age this year. I mean, he got in the right situation. Got into a developmental situation, got some minutes, and started to develop, and that shot is still pure. When I think of Isaiah Joe, I think of Jordan Hawkins, and I really like Hawkins quite a bit, who played high school ball at DeMatha, the powerhouse program in Maryland, and then obviously played at Connecticut. They won the national championship. What a shooter, huh? I mean, is he the best shooter in this draft, and how do you see his pro future?
I probably would say Grady Dick's the best shooter, but I love Jordan Hawkins, and I think I love Isaiah Joe too. I always did, even when he was at Arkansas. And I think that the difference with Jordan Hawkins compared to both those guys is I think he's got the potential of not only just being a shooter, but being a dynamic scorer all the way around. He's really got a lot of an untapped potential still. I mean, he needs to get stronger, which I think he will be able to do. And the style of play, you can fit that guy anywhere because he's not only just a shooter, he's a movement shooter. So he doesn't need the ball in his hands to be a high volume scorer, which I just think is really valuable because guys like that don't come around all that often.
Are these guys all committed to the draft, or when's the deadline where they can go back to school if they choose?
Yeah, it's next week, May 31st. So, I just updated our mock draft a couple days ago, and to be completely honest with you, the second round, I mean, a lot of the guys I put in or left off, it was very arbitrary, to be honest with you. So I'm looking forward to getting past that deadline and figuring out what's our crop of players we're really needing to kind of sort through.
Yeah, one of the guys that a couple guys that I really loved this year, watching them play in the tournament, were from Creighton. Is it Shireman, Baylor Shireman?
Yep.
That guy can flat out shoot it. I mean, he's a tremendous shooter at about 6'6", 6'7". NBA athleticism, I don't know about that. I'll defer to somebody like yourself, but man, Shireman can shoot it. And then Kalkbrenner, the big man for Creighton, I didn't get to see the scrimmage that he played in Chicago, but I know he was there. How did he look in the scrimmage that you saw? And give me your thoughts on those two guys. I mean, are those two guys, are they NBA players? Are they not NBA players? Are they second round picks, projectable? I mean, I don't know. It seems like Kalkbrenner has got that great frame, the broad shoulders. Seems like that if he's got some work to do, but he's intriguing, and Shireman can just flat out shoot the heck out of it. What do you think of those two guys at the next level?
Yeah, I like both. I mean, the one thing with Baylor Sharman, he already decided he's going back
He's
to
going back.
school.
Okay.
So I was able to cross him off the list and put him on the back burner for next year. But he's certainly a guy that will, I'll be keeping tabs on. And with Kalkbrenner, I'm expecting him to go back to school. The word is that Creighton put together a pretty big NIL package for him. But he was at the combine. I thought he did really well. I mean, pretty much the same thoughts I had throughout the year with him. He's huge, and for his size, he moves really well. So he doesn't necessarily fall into that category of being this traditional big that doesn't necessarily fit well. Although he probably would have fit better in years past, it's still not a huge issue because he does move pretty fluidly and just very coordinated for his size. I mean, he's like 7'1", and so I mean, he gets anywhere around the rim, he's throwing that thing down. And so I am expecting him to be an NBA player, probably just not this year. They also had another guy, Arthur Kaluma, at the combine.
Yeah, who's talented.
He was good too. Undersized, versatile four. He had a couple big time dunks. Very, very exciting player. My bet is that he'll probably go back to school too. And if I remember correctly, I believe his name is in the transfer portal.
Oh, he's going to leave Creighton.
I think so. If I remember correctly, yeah.
Well, I was going to say if he goes back to Creighton, you can almost pencil them for the Final Four. I mean, then they're going to be stacked, and they're well coached as well. How about Amari Bailey? It seemed like every time I watched Amari Bailey, he just played well, and then this guy just knows how to play. I mean, he's a 6'5", 190-pound guard, probably a combo guard. I mean, to me, he seems like a point guard, but this guy's a Chicago kid who played at Sierra Canyon down in Southern Cal this last year. What do you or played for UCLA, but as a freshman this last year, but came out of Sierra Canyon. What do you think of Bailey? Now, is that Toby Bailey's brother?
No,
No
I don't believe so. I've watched Amari for years. I mean, he was one of the highest rated high school players in his class for a long time. And, really just like a typical Chicago kid. He's tough as nails. I mean, that's the one thing I like about him the most. And he was terrific at the combine. I was glad to see he decided to play rather than, dodge the smoke. And, really did a good job of, showing his combo guard skills. In the past, I've sort of penciled him in as a tunnel vision scorer where everything's to the hole. He really showed his development with his ball skills and his floor game. The one thing I'd like to see him, where I think he's got room for growth, is finding a better balance of getting to the rim and sort of, being a tunnel vision driver and outside shooting. I just think he needs to rewire his approach a little bit of being a little bit more of a threat from outside. Just because, I mean, the chances are for a guy like that, he's probably not going to be the best player on the floor ever again. And so the floor spacing is so important in the NBA these days. And so that's one thing I'd like to see him address. But regardless, he moved the needle for himself at Chicago.
Where do you think he'll wind up in the draft?
I think he's a solid second round pick. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if he got into the late first, but he's probably early second, mid second somewhere.
Another player that's intriguing to me is CD Sissoko, the 6'8" shooting guard, I think he's from France, played in the G League this last year. This guy needs skill development for sure, but when you look at the frame and you look at the athleticism, he's a guy that you'd want to invest some time in for sure. Is Sissoko a first round pick? Is he going back? What do you think his NBA future looks like? I mean, he's got a projectable body, but the skill development needs work.
Yeah, no, I've liked him all year. He was on the G League Ignite, and I think he's like a late first, early second type. And I don't really see him as a guard. I see him more as like a big wing or even like a hybrid forward where you can play him as like a small ball four because he's got the big body, even though he's more of a perimeter wing slasher type. And probably not ready to contribute on a super high level right off the bat, but the upside's certainly there. And I think somebody will probably snag him late first, early second.
Couple more before we let you go. Julian Strother from Gonzaga, Andrew Timme. They're both going to be probably second round picks in this draft. Timmy is interesting to me just because he's got like, to me, almost the best footwork I think I've ever seen out of a big man. I mean, since Kevin McHale or something. I mean, this guy's he can foul you out. He can up and under. He's got all kinds of moves and counter moves and moves off of his moves, and his footwork is really, really, really good. I mean, it seems like he's been in college since 25 years or something. But is Timmy, what do you think of Timmy at the pro level? Does he have enough of range on his shot? Does he have enough of a face-up game to be anything other than just kind of a stretch five in a limited role? Or does Timmy have more upside and we just aren't seeing it?
Timmy's tough. I mean, he definitely falls. He's definitely a victim of the new modern NBA. I've drawn the comparison of Mikal a number of times too. He's got such a knack to score around the rim, and his footwork and his touch with both hands it's really uncanny. And unfortunately, that skill set's not as valuable in the NBA these days. So he's going to need to adapt. The one thing that's really bothered me with Timmy the last few years is he really hasn't addressed his physical issues much. He hasn't got much stronger. It doesn't seem like he's all that fit. Comparatively speaking with some of these prospects. So he's going to have a chance. And from my understanding, he's even though he could go back, for another year, it sounds like he's all in to start his pro career. He's got a chance of getting drafted, and he'll have a chance of clawing his way into. But he's going to need to adapt his game a little bit.
How about Strother? I mean, he could flat out shoot it, but is there more to his game than just the shot?
Yeah, I think he's a very explosive athlete. I mean, good finisher. I can't say I'm quite as high on him as some people are, but a very relevant prospect. I've got him in the second round currently.
The NC State kid, tested the waters last year, Terquavian Smith, and then went back to NC State. And, he's an interesting player too. He's kind of some people make him the comparison to Bones Highland. We're talking about a guy who scored 19 points a game in the ACC. He doesn't do a whole lot else, though. He did mix in 4.5 assists a game. He's a 20-year-old sophomore. I don't know. I mean, how did he look in Chicago? I like his offensive potential. I just don't know. Well, he's kind of a combo guard. To me, he's not really even a combo guard. He's just an undersized two. What do you look when you see Terquavion? What's your thoughts?
I've got mixed feelings there. I mean, and I could see the Bones Highland comparison. He's an undersized, very thin, scoring guard, but when he gets going, he's a spark plug, just like Bones. I would say he's probably not quite as good as Bones, at least in my opinion. In that first day in Chicago of the live play, he really, really struggled, and probably the biggest loser of the day in regards to the draft stock and whatnot. The second day, credit to him, he did turn it around. Really showed well, and I'm still kind of going back and forth of like what role he would fill at the NBA. But definitely can score when he gets it going.
Who were the biggest winners in Chicago in your mind?
Let's see here. I think the kid Omax from Marquette, Olivier Maxon's Prosper, he was terrific. And, he had a good year at Marquette, but I mean, the one day he did play, I mean, he sure looked like a first round pick to me. And I didn't push him up quite that high yet, but I'm suspecting that I'm going to keep kind of chipping away at his value within the draft.
Is he? A lot of people comparing him to the Matrix. I mean, he's really long, right? You're talking about a kind of a 6'7" small forward, but just crazy length, right?
Yeah,
and he's great leaper, great runner, great athlete.
I got a chance to meet him too. The nicest kid. I met his family too. Just really nice people, which I think will help too. I mean, the kind of guy you want in your program and to develop in the long term. And the other kid that really stood out was a Serbian kid. Tristan Vukcevic, stretch big, almost 7 feet. He was just filling it up, hitting shots from all over the court. And we keep talking about the modern NBA, and having a 7-footer that could make shots like that with range is definitely holds some value. And I think he moved his value up a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. The NBA draft has him at 47. Heck, if I were the Warriors, I might take him at 19. Let's talk about Vucevic for a second. They list him at 6'11", 205. This kid played professionally in Italy, right? He's from Serbia, but played for Real Madrid, and I guess his hometown. He's a Serbian-born guy, but he grew up in Italy, Siena, Italy, and played for Real Madrid. But I saw him in the scrimmages. I mean, hits a big three, doesn't hit, nothing but net, hits another three, nothing but net. Then he's coming across the lane. He does a little face up, nothing but net. Then he hits another shot off the elbow, nothing but net. It's like the guy's shot looked incredible, and he shoots it high. I mean, can he defend anybody? I mean, that would be my only concern. Is he, to me, I mean, if you say, well, what is he? I don't know. I mean, Warrior fans, we saw Nemanja Bjelica a year or two ago, and Bjelica was a big man who could flat out shoot it. This guy can shoot it better than him, I think, in some ways. Was that just a hot run in Chicago, or is this one of the real quick risers in this draft?
It's a little tough because, I mean, obviously it was one game, so you don't want to do a knee jerk reaction on such a small sample size. But I mean, he was really terrific. I mean, just as a shot maker, I mean, I would say he's somewhat one dimensional as just a big shot maker shooter. But I mean, that's probably the most valuable skill in the NBA right now, and you add that on with positional size. I mean, the concerns there are, okay, you got a small sample size to evaluate this kid for one, but also he needs to get a lot stronger. His lack of physicality is a big problem, especially on the defensive end. He's not very good defensively, not the greatest rebounder, doesn't absorb contact very well. So there's a lot of room for growth, but I do think somebody probably in the late first or early second will jump at him, just having a big guy that could shoot it at that level.
What would you do with him? Would you stash him in Europe for a year or two? Or would you bring him over? I mean, he's a 20-year-old player. He played against older players this last year. He averaged 17, 7, and 3. That's not bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the team, and what their roster makeup is and whatnot. But I do like the idea of international players having hypothetically more flexibility of what you do with them. Could you leave them in Europe? But either way, I think this guy's going to be somewhat of a developmental project. Because for him to play major minutes in the NBA, he's really going to need to kind of grow physically and get better on the defensive end.
Couple last ones before we let you go. Adam Bona, the center for the Bruins, is interesting to me. Is he going back to school?
Yeah, from my understanding, it's likely that he'll go back to school unless he gets some kind of unique promise. I'm not. I mean, it could happen. I'm expecting him to go back to UCLA for another year, and he'll probably be a high priority guy for me to scout and NBA teams to scout next year.
I mean, really intriguing though. I mean, this guy's super long, 6'10", 6'11", 230. He's from Nigeria, right? And then came over, played for Prolific Prep. What do you think? I mean, Bona's he's just a run and jump athlete at this point. He needs more basketball skill development, but I mean, unbelievable upside. I mean, I could see this guy in 2 or 3 years being a phenomenal big man who can run the floor and do a number of things.
I totally agree. I love him. I've been watching him for years. When he was at the high school level, and the guy he reminds me of is Clint Capella. And as far as he's definitely got room for growth to add to his skills. But I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that a guy like this can just do a few simple things. Play hard, physicality, use his length, athleticism to be a rim runner, rim protector, and carve out a really great career. And that's even if he doesn't add a whole lot to his offensive arsenal. So big fan of Adem Bona's. It's just a matter of when, if it's this year or next.
How about the Arizona big man, Tubelis? They're thinking late second round, but he had a nice year in the Pac-12 this year. Almost 7 feet tall. What do you think of the big man from Arizona?
Yeah, I mean, that's my alma mater, and we had I'm part of Damian Lillard's Formula Zero, and we had Big Zoo as a player, a participant out there last summer, so I got to know him personally too. Really good kid, tough kid. Had a great year at Arizona. I think he just needs to figure out what's his role in the NBA. He's not really a 4, not really a 5, so he's somewhat of a tweener. But he gets it done. And what's interesting with him is if at a certain point it's not working in the NBA, that guy could go make so much money in Europe. But either way, I'm rooting for him. Just a really good guy.
You mentioned Weber State. Who was the guy at Weber State that was in Chicago? 6'5" guy, but kind of put together, almost like a football player. But man, the guy really looked good. I forget his name, but
Dylan Jones. There's another guy we had at Formula Zero, and I've got to be really close with Dylan. He probably was the biggest winner of the whole week because he got a spot at the G League Elite Camp, and earned an invite there to the combine. And then he was one of the best players in the two live days of games. And so he's an interesting spot because he's not in the transfer portal. So if he goes back, he'll be going back to Weber State, which I don't think there'll be a whole lot of NIL money because it's a smaller school. So it's kind of a tough spot. Do you juggle, hey, start your pro career now, have a chance to get drafted, or go back to, to a small school?
One guy I really like at Penn State is Seth Lundy, who can flat out shoot it as well. 6'6" guy. And I know this is a New Jersey kid who, I think when I see him shoot, I think, wow, I mean, this guy, I mean, I can't believe I didn't hear more about him this year. I love his shooting mechanics, and I just love the way, I mean, he seems like he can shoot it, contested shots. His shot seems really pure. Tell us a little bit about Seth Lundy from Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. He shoots the heck out of it, and he's not shy either. He was letting it fly, which credit to him. He was hitting most of them, so he should have let it flow. But yeah, no, I is a guy that wasn't high on my radar all year, but did really well at the combine. He's got a nice physical frame, strong kid, and he just shoots the lights out. And so it's one of those things with a guy with positional size that can shoot it. You really can't count him out.
Is Zach Edey going back to Purdue, or you think he's staying in the draft? He's 7'4", 290. To me, he's not NBA. I think he's just a backup kind of novelty player. But, it's 7'4", 290. He's definitely improved a ton since I first saw him. What do you think of Edey's game?
It's funny. I just released a podcast yesterday, pretty much discussing, how the college game, the NBA game is so different, and big guys are somewhat of a dying breed at the NBA level, but they're not in college. And Zach Edey's, might be the poster child of that concept of, being this dominant college player. Drew Timme, the same thing. And I don't think he can afford to go to the NBA. I have to imagine his NIL money on the table is huge. Go back to Purdue. So it's, be a fringe second round pick. You might end up on a two-way contract. That's essentially a non-guaranteed contract. I think from a business standpoint, he'd be making a mistake if he didn't stay in school.
You don't see too many seniors in the draft, but Isaiah Wong kind of opened my eyes from Miami. Is he a point guard? Is he a two? He's a Piscataway, New Jersey kid who played at Miami. He's definitely super thin, but I love the interview the kid did. It seemed like a really nice kid.
Yeah, he's just a scorer. I definitely don't think he doesn't think like a traditional point guard. He's looking to get some buckets, and he's more than capable. Just kind of an undersized scorer, similar to Terquavion Smith that we mentioned before. And so yeah, he's got a chance of being drafted.
Locally, we got two guys I got to get your thoughts on. One is Amari Moore from San Jose State, and man, Amari Moore is like a 6'6" point guard, combo guard. But what an athlete he is. I mean, give me your thoughts on Amari Moore. Is he, he's a senior, so he's done at San Jose State. Is he an NBA backup? Do you see him getting drafted? Do you see the potential that I see? Because I see a really long, athletic, strong defensive player.
Yeah, I also like his craftiness with the ball too. I sort of saw a little bit of like a Jamal Crawford in where he's got a little bit of wiggle, able to shake guys. Not a guy that I followed closely all year, but he's really grown on me, the further we get along. And what's interesting, from my understanding, he's a senior, but with a lot of these seniors, it's hard to keep track. Can go back for their fifth year with their COVID year, and so I think he was in that category. But I believe he's staying in the draft, is what I think I read something today. Yeah, he's definitely got a chance of getting drafted. Didn't play overly well at the combine, but was able to show his skill set and sort of versatility with his size, and I think he's a chance of being pretty dynamic. Definitely an interesting prospect for sure.
How about the Santa Clara kid, Brandon Podziemski? I watched him, and it's like I read the reports on him, and people are saying, "Man, this guy is incredible. He's got a 39-inch vertical, and he's listed at 6'5". He's from Wisconsin." I don't know. I didn't see that kind of premier athleticism. I felt like I was watching a player in kind of slow motion. But there are people that really like him and think that he's got some major potential. What did you think of him? Did I butcher his name? Is he Podziemski or something like that?
Podziemski, I believe, yeah. Interesting case, because he was at Illinois' freshman year last year and didn't play. Wasn't in the rotation. transferred to Santa Clara and just really lit it up all year. And I mean, very dynamic offensively, just did a little bit of everything: playmaker, scorer, shooter. And he's also a terrific rebounder, even though he's a combo guard. And he was great at the combine too. He was definitely one, probably in that first group of guys that you pencil in as the guys that help themselves. And physical, tough, do it all combo. And it's interesting, pretty explosive, not that quick though. I mean, he's not blowing by anybody, but he really knows how to play. I mean, I've heard some people even talk about him potentially as a first round pick. I see him more as like a solid second, but he's put himself on the map for sure.
Last one, if we if somebody comes up to you and goes, give me a second round sleeper, give me somebody who's nobody's really talking about that you saw in Chicago or maybe seen somewhere on the scouting trail and think, wow, this guy is going to be looked over and watch out.
It's probably not the answer you'd think I'd say because of how much hype he got in the past, but I think some people are sleeping on Amani Bates now. I mean, just because it's really he's gone down to the about as low as he possibly could after being hyped up as this next generational talent. I think he's still got a chance of being a pretty high profile player, as like a 6'8", 6'9" shooter and tough shot maker. And I thought I was impressed with him in Chicago. It seems like it's really starting to click as far as his attitude, his approach. Still needs to get a lot stronger, but that's one guy that I'd keep an eye on in the second round. And I mean, pretty much, anywhere in the second round. I mean, he's a first round talent still in my mind. Obviously, there's some risk there with some of the baggage with him. The upside's still there though, in my book.
One from the chat, my good friend Dan Coach Emilio says, yes, Vucevic looks good. He says, ask him about Najee for the Warriors or Lively from Duke. Let's talk about those two guys. Lively is interesting. I mean, big man from Duke. I mean, Duke's always gets some top guys, but this guy's 7'1", 230 pounds. Philadelphia kid. What can you tell us about Najee and Derek Lively?
Yeah, so Lively first. So I mean, one of the top rated kids in his high school class. I mean, he got a lot of attention, and he's huge, and he really moves well. Struggled at Duke to start the year, but by the end of the year, really kind of put together a good season overall. I thought about him in our mock draft for Golden State. The reason I held back on it was just with things not going that well with Wiseman and the way Kerr likes coaching. I mean, doesn't like playing traditional bigs all that much. I didn't know if it was the greatest fit or not, but definitely a player they could look at that spot. And then with Najee, sort of interesting. He kind of like a Dwight Howard, Jalen Duren type, just very physical. Does your sort of blue collar big man type stuff. Probably somewhat of a project, but I mean, two guys that if the Warriors did want to look at a big man, would be good names.
Yeah. What did you think of Jordan Poole when he was coming out in the draft? Were you a Jordan Poole fan, or were you surprised at what he's been able to accomplish?
I saw the craftiness and the ball handling. I'm surprised he's gone to the level he's at. I mean, he's definitely surpassed my expectations. But I was intrigued by him, but wasn't overly like in love with him as a prospect.
So 19 Warriors come up. Last one here. If they're staring at a board that has everybody there, Chris Murray, Leonard Miller, Trace Jackson Davis, Jordan Hawkins, all these guys, Lively, they're all sitting right there. What do you think they do at 19?
I mean, if Jordan Hawkins is there at 19, you can't overthink that one. I think he's going to be a lottery pick. And so, of that grouping, it would be Jordan Hawkins easily, for me.
And your over-under on where Leonard Miller gets picked is what number? Where would you put him?
I think he's going to be probably in the early mid-20s. I mean, I know that's not a specific number, but it'll be in that range, I would think.
What's left for you as far as between now and the draft to people who are checking you out? By the way, Matt Babcock is with us. He's got the Matt Babcock Show podcast. He's a senior NBA draft analyst for Draft Digest. If people are hearing you for the first time and are saying, man, Matt knows his stuff. Well, first of all, he wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have him on if he didn't know his stuff. But also tell people where they can find what you're talking about and putting out there for the public on the draft between now and the draft at the Barclays Center. What, about a month from now?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm going to start traveling around, going to some pre-draft workouts, meeting with some of the players, getting to know them personally. We're going to be releasing some episodes on my podcast, The Matt Babcock Show, which is on whichever platform you like to get your podcast. Then as far as Draft Digest goes, I've got several former NBA scouts working with me and providing scout reports on a lot of the prospects. And then I'll be updating our mock draft probably several more times between now and the draft. And, based on my background of growing up in the NBA, working as an agent in the last 5 years, being an NBA draft analyst, I'm well connected with the teams. So the closer we get to the draft, I start incorporating intel more and more. And the idea is throughout the year, a lot of it's my own personal opinions. And hopefully by draft night, I've got a good grip of what the teams are actually going to do. So love it if guys, everybody could follow me and on Twitter, on Instagram at Matt Babcock 11, and then check out Draft Digest, which is part of Sports Illustrated.
Are you friends with Bob Myers? What's your guess on Myers? Is he coming back? You think he's moving on? A lot of talk about him joining the Clippers.
I worked for Bob. My first job out of college was a summer internship at Wasserman Media Group, and Bob was an agent, and that's who I reported to. Bob's a great guy. Obviously, he's had so much success as a GM. And then there was rumblings that he was leaving, but it sounds like he's probably coming back, is the last I heard. But definitely rooting for Bob. What a great guy.
What do you think of him as an evaluator, and what do you think of Golden State as an evaluation group? Because they also have Larry Harris. I think Larry Harris is a phenomenal evaluator. Obviously, for years they had Jerry West. West in my mind is kind of considered to be like the creme de la creme. Maybe Sam Presti. Maybe there's a couple others. But what do you think of the Warrior Brain Trust overall?
No, I think it's great. And I grew up with Larry. Larry was the general manager of the Bucks, and my dad was his number 2 for years. So I go way back with Larry, and I think they've done a great job. I think it's interesting. It's been an interesting situation for them the last few years, where they had this dynasty team, weird injuries, couple of years where they got some good picks. And so now you've got all these young guys with these aging stars. And so I think Wiseman is a perfect example of there really just wasn't opportunity for him to develop properly. And so I think. Guys like Moses Moody and Kuminga, I think they've still got a lot of untapped potential. It's just sort of that balance of being a winning team and developing your youth, which is really a challenging thing to juggle. But them as evaluators, I think they're as good as it gets.
Yeah. Matt, great stuff, man. We appreciate you. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for jumping on the Krug show. And maybe after the draft, we can get you back on and we can get your thoughts on what the Warriors actually ultimately decided to do. Appreciate you.
Sounds great. Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Matt. Matt Babcock. He's fantastic. And check him out, senior NBA draft analyst, Draft Digest, and check out the Matt Babcock podcast, or the Matt Babcock show, which is podcasted, and you can find it where all podcasts are found. And he's a great follow on Twitter as well, at Matt Babcock. Phenomenal guys. So hope you enjoyed some of the basketball discussion. Of course, we are brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, 2 locations, Emeryville and Corte Madera. Here's what they look like in Marin.
So New York Style Sausage was started over 70 years ago. We are the largest producer of fresh Italian sausage on the West Coast.
What makes our sausage in New York Style is really the recipe came from back east, from New York, from Connecticut.
If you look at all of our labels, there's maximum 4 or 5 ingredients, which we're really proud of.
There's no preservatives, no MSG, fresh in, fresh out.
The pork comes in fresh. goes out fresh. There's never any freezing throughout the process. We've always used fine quality cuts. We're never going to deter from that. It's one of the reasons why our sausage is so good. I guarantee you put our sausage up against anybody else's from a flavor standpoint, no one will beat it, hands down.
And do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go buy a package of the New York style Italian sausage. Guaranteed you will love it. Guaranteed.
All right, coming down the home stretch on the Krug Show, a couple more chats to check out. Bay Area Baller, good to see you, Baller. He says, trade Andrew Wiggins, Jordan Poole, and picks to Toronto for Siakam and OJ Anunoby. Wiggins goes back home. Yeah, Wiggins is a Canadian guy. Trade him back to Canada. I don't know that Toronto's doing that. I'm not sure that Toronto would make that move. Baller says Siakam is on the last year of his deal, so the Warriors would have to be confident they could re-sign him, but that might be the reason the Raptors would trade Siakam. Okay, well, that makes a little sense for sure. I'll just say this. I don't want to see the Warriors go after LeBron. I definitely don't want to see LeBron here. I'd rather them go young and not win a title than add LeBron and not win a title. And I don't know that the Warriors are going to win any more titles with their current crop, but I definitely don't want to see them sell out all their young players. From what I'd heard, it was like Poole, Kuminga, Moody, and picks to the Lakers for LeBron. No way. I definitely don't want to see them do that. That would not make me happy because I just don't. To me, the Warriors built their core in the draft, and it's not easy to do. But I would try to do that again. I would try to build up through the draft. And even if that means you've got, some younger players, you're not, you went down this 2 timeline path and now and I think it was a solid decision. It didn't work out this year, but now you're going to pivot off of that and accelerate everything into LeBron James and trying desperately to win one more title this year. And then what happens if the King breaks down or Steph breaks down or any of these veteran players break down and suddenly now you're nothing. Now you've driven your franchise off a cliff and you have no assets going forward that you can pivot to, and you're just going to have to take your lumps in an enormously expensive arena with a team that's going to be in the lottery for a 4 to 5 year period of time. That could be very, very difficult to get people through the turnstiles at Chase for the prices they're charging if they drive the whole thing off the cliff. So I don't think I would do that. I definitely don't think I would go the LeBron James route. I'd rather take my chances of moving Poole, trying to find some nice pieces in the draft and seeing if you can build your core. I mean, you found Steph at 7, Clay at 11, Draymond at 35. Have confidence that you can find some guys in the middle of the first round, maybe at 19, maybe you can add a pick here or two, and find somebody, find some young players. The one thing that's the beauty of the draft today, it's very much projectable. So the guy that you get in the second round may wind up being a star. The guy you wind up getting at 7 may wind up being a bust. It's very much a projection into the future, and it really highlights it highlights the value of picks overall and the need to have really good evaluators. It was interesting to hear from Matt Babcock, who worked for Bob Myers, say that his latest intel is that Myers would be maybe coming back. So that would be good news for the Warriors. I don't want to see Bob Myers leave. I'd rather see him stay. I think he would be, to me, as a Bay Area guy and as a lifelong Warrior guy, I like the fact that Bob is also a Bay Area guy and a lifelong Warrior guy. So I hope here's one vote for Bob Myers returning. All right, that is going to do it for us. No Vish today. We thought we were going to have Vish, but Vish has got to work. Jess, join us tonight at 6 o'clock on the Krug Show for a little Jesse Naylor. He's going to stop by. We'll talk a little 49er offseason with Jesse, and we'll get into the quarterbacks again. We'll get into the OTAs. Join me tonight on the channel at 6 o'clock for more Niner discussion coming up But hope you enjoyed the little basketball discussion. We don't do a lot of NBA draft stuff, and it's not nearly as popular as baseball or football or the Niners or the NFL draft. But hope you enjoyed Matt Babcock. He's a legitimate former scout, former agent, really tied into the players, was in Chicago at the pre-draft. And I hope you enjoyed some of the comments that he brought forward on the upcoming NBA draft, which will take place in late June at the Barclays Center in New York. All right, have a great rest of your day. We'll see you at 6 with Jesse on the Krug Show, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to hassle.